Last week on the channel, we started a brand new series that we're calling Recording, Editing, Mixing, and Mastering Worship Music. And that was sort of a broad strokes overview video where we're detailing David and I's plan to take a live recording of the song Waymaker that we did at the Creek Church in London, Kentucky. And we're going to take that and show you how it was all recorded, how we're going to get it edited, mixed, and how it can be made to be release ready, and how you can replicate this entire process for your church as well. Last week's video, which you can watch right here, was more of a broad strokes kind of overview of everything that we want this series to be. But this week's video, we're going to go into detail, and we're going to show you the console, the computers, how everything is connected together, the microphones, how the recording was made, and it all starts now on Capsule to Come. Before we can dive into mixing, I think it's important to talk about how a recording like this was made. This is pretty simple, and it's not going to be like one of your large-scale recordings that you would see done at like a Bethel or a larger church like Elevation like that. Those, without getting too much into the weeds about how those records are produced, there's a lot more that goes into it, with a lot of pre-production that actually happens in the studio, and then lots and lots, I'm talking dozens, multiple dozens of crowd microphones and captures that are all blended together to create a very, very epic live recording. But then there are also some smaller scale live recordings that a lot of those churches do that really are just, capturing what's coming through the board during a live performance and having a few crowd mics, room mics, whatever, and then blending it together and maybe having a few overdubs or something like that if there's something that needs to be touched up, or, some things can be edited, but those are a little bit more raw and live and less like a big release that's going to be on, Spotify, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. This could still be a release like that and could be even married to the video, but it definitely is more of a live thing. But we still want to sound good when we're releasing something, even if it is a little live and maybe a little less perfect than a gigantic release that cost $250,000 to make. You can still get a really, really good sounding result, and it's something that I think that is easily able to be replicated in a smaller church setting. And so that's what we're here to do today, is to kind of show you and use this example of something that was captured at my church and how you can apply it to your own local church. So, first of all, we got to talk about the console. The console that we use is an Allen & Heath D-Live S7000, and then we have a CDM 64 mix rack, and those two are connected over Ethernet. The CDM64 is sort of like the Stage Snake. In the D-Live world, it's a little more complicated than that. A lot of the brains of the operation takes place in the CDM64, but you kind of need to have both pieces if you want to have, faders in the control surface. The S7000 is mostly a control surface, but there is some I/O on it. In ours specifically, we have a Waves card and we have a Dante card. So that is the main two components. All of our analog signal comes into the CDM64, which is backstage, just like any Stage Snake would be. And then a lot of our digital signals, so our wireless Shure microphones, are connected over Dante. So that's going on the Dante network and comes back to the S7000 control surface at front of house. The way that we're capturing the performance is that we're using a Waves sound grid setup. So we've got our sound grid impact server, and we've got Waves Super Rack where we're doing some processing at front of house, and then we also have a computer that is running a laptop, and all those are connected together to the S7000 with insert points that are patched in, and so we can do some processing with Super Rack, and then we can also capture every input that's coming into the console using Reaper. Now, I have no idea. I know nothing about Reaper. Our IT guy at church actually set this up for me, and then we actually called Waves because I have never in 12 years of working in a studio and 8 years of owning my own studio, I have never once used Reaper or barely dabbled in it, other than maybe to try to help a client learn how to export stems so that I could mix something in Pro Tools. And so that is exactly what I did. Is once we got the files recorded, I brought it back here to the studio and exported it from Reaper and just bounced it all down to mono wave files. And so that's what's going to be in the description box below that you can download. To go ahead and talk about the live microphones that are on stage, all the vocal mics, we're using Shure ULX series wireless microphones. I think it's ULX. If it's not, I'll correct it with a little annotation or whatever on the video. But we're using Shure wireless microphones, and Sarah has a Shure KSM 8 capsule on her microphone. So that's a condenser microphone capsule that's on the wireless microphone. The others are a mix between Beta 58s, a Beta 87, and then Zach, who's not singing in the song, is using an SE Electronics V7 vocal microphone. I want to go ahead and talk about the drum mics and the drums. We're using a DW Performance Series drum kit, and we have Zildjian K custom cymbals, and we've also got an 8x14 Black Beauty snare. So those are the drums that you're hearing in this. We are going to make some drum samples, but in the actual files that we have for you to download, you are hearing the shells of the kit. We have two microphones inside the kick drum. On the inside, we've got a Shure Beta 91, and on the outside, we are using an Audix D6 kick drum microphone. And when I say outside, it's not really the same as what I would do like in the studio. The outside would actually be on the outside head, and it would be probably something like a FET 47 or something like this. This is more like I would call it kick in and kick out, just so that my brain kind of knows how to think of it from recording songs in here. But on this, it's actually, they're both sort of inside, and one of them is laying on a pillow, and that's that boundary mic, the 91, and then the other one is the D6. And those I'm blending together live in front of house, and using one to get a little bit more beefy bottom end and one to get a little bit more of the tacky click, which is the 91. In the mix, though, who knows what we'll do. We may end up only using one of those and augmenting with a couple of different drum samples, which is pretty typical, but we've got both of those microphones for you to download. The snare drum, like I said, is 8x14 Black Beauty, and we've got a Shure SM57 on top and a Shure SM57 on bottom. The toms, for this night of worship, I had decided to do something that I have not done before live in the room, but because I knew that we were capturing, and then also I just wanted to see how it sounded live in the room, I double mic'd both of the toms. So they have an Audix D2 on the rack tom and a D4 on the floor tom on top, and then on the bottom of the toms, I've got Sennheiser 604s. The overheads are Shure KSM 32s. I like those because I use them here at the studio a lot. Sometimes I use them on toms, sometimes I use them on overheads. They're a really great workhorse microphone, and so that's what we're using for our overheads. We have the black edition at church just because it looks a little better on video than to have giant silver microphones kind of floating overhead in the video. So that is everything that we have for drums. For the bass, we just have the DI'd clean bass. Now, when I'm running front of house, and this might be in the room mics a little bit, probably not a whole lot, I would guess, but I actually am splitting the bass guitar signal into two, and we're using the clean DI and then blending it with a really dirty signal that's scooped out, very scooped in the mid-range, and tucking that down. And I do that, I add a lot of that dirt with Super Rack, which you can see my chain right here. I'm using a Waves GTR plugin, and I'm using some compression and some limiting, I think, on that. So that's how I'm creating that dirty bass sound. Moving on, we have two guitars, and during this night of worship, we had actually EG1 was playing through an Axe-Fx 3, and EG2 was playing through a Kemper. The Axe-Fx was already gone and put away and not on the stage anymore, and so I only have B-roll of the one Kemper, but both of our guitar players were using modelers that night. So just remember, when you finally get to go through and mix these files, that EG1 is an Axe-Fx and EG2 is a Kemper, no live amps. And then the third electric guitar that's in the tracks, That, I don't know what that is or how that was captured. That might be a Kemper, but it also could be some actual recording. That is just from the multi-tracks that we play out of Ableton. Which brings me to the next part of this video, that we are running tracks live and those are captured individually. So we've got the click and the guide, which that's going to help us when we get to the editing portion to be able to calculate the timing and to make sure that our edits are good, and also that we know what parts of the song that we're at. So we've got the click and the guide, and then we also have a loop track and a keys track and a bass track and a guitar track. Actually, there won't be any bass on this because I don't think we had any synth bass. Our bass player was actually sick that night, so all of the bass was just a DI track that we were running from Ableton that night. Lastly on that, we have strings and we have a BGV track. I don't think that we'll use the BGV track. I keep that tucked in pretty low at front of house because it sounds a little bit wonky, probably for like a recording in the room. You don't really notice it, especially if it's tucked in, but where we change the key of the song and it's not always in the same key, I think that the tracks were pitched down a little bit, and they were, to me, they were a little goofy sounding. They're still in there if you want to listen to them, but I wouldn't make them like a feature point of the recording. Next, we've got a couple of different keyboards. We've got our main kind of stereo keyboard, which is our Nord, and that's probably going to be playing mostly like a piano kind of a sound in this. And then we've also got a synth that was being played by one of our other keyboard players, and that is coming from, that's just a preset coming from main stage. Oh, we're gonna have an acoustic guitar in here, and that is just a DI. That's just Zach's Gibson J45. And so that's just coming DI, actually through a Sennheiser wireless, and then the wireless is coming over Dante. That's how it gets into the console, is what I mean to say. And then lastly, we have a couple of crowd mics and a couple of room mics. Now, the crowd mics are at the lip of the stage, and one of the things that I don't love about where we decided to place this is that it is right beside the fills, but the fills are behind the mic, so I think that they're getting a little bit of rejection from the fills. It's pretty loud in our room anyways, and we have a, you know, for this we had a pretty big audience. I think there was around 750 in attendance that night, or pretty close to 700 anyways, and so we had a good sized crowd, and you know, we get a little bit of room ambience, and you get some of the crowd in there with these two front-facing kind of audience mics or whatever. And then we've got a couple of room mics that are actually like a stack. It's like an array of crowd microphones that are placed kind of in the ceiling. And part of that is for recording purposes, but we also send a little bit of that to the band's ears. And so that's all gets summed down to mono in the middle of the mix. We get the width from the two microphones that are at the lip of the stage. So, and those two microphones that are at the lip of the stage are just Audix 80K 51s or something. I can't remember the number on them, but they're I think they're about $200 new, so they're not like a super high-end condenser microphone. So, all right, so that's it. Those are the microphones and the sources and how everything is captured and gets into the DAW. Like I said, go in the description box below and you can get all of these files, bring them into your DAW so that you can start working on them. The next video, we're gonna go ahead and start talking about getting the performance edited, which is not going to include the vocal tuning. Vocal tuning will be a separate video. We're going to use Melodyne for that, and that's going to be in a couple of weeks. But for right now, let's go ahead and get those files and start following along with us, and get everything checked out and start getting your session organized. And then we'll go through the next steps and get the song edited. All right, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next video.